It's not about finding purpose. It's about removing the blocks so you can see what's there. We are here. We are the essence of who we are. We came here for a reason. Purpose is aligned with passion. What are you passionate about? What do you do that you don't have to think about? You just do it. And then once you have to manufacture a business or a job around it, then it becomes a pressure. What's my purpose? And I always say to people who are like, well, I don't know my purpose. It's not that we don't know our purpose. It's that we're just feeling a little disconnected from ourselves.
So today we have Stephanie, an Earthkeeper and guide to the Maverick change agents who work to reboot our world naturally. She is also a speaker, impact strategist, and attorney. That's a lot. Can't wait to dive into that. With a deep love of the trees, with a decade of experience living and studying it with indigenous communities and working in environmental justice, Stephanie has a wealth of knowledge to share. She keeps individuals and organizations to connect to their true selves and do the work they're meant to do through her coaching program. And most interesting to me, and again, can't wait to dive into this, her shamanic energy medicine sessions. Stephanie's a light leader who guides change agents through these intense times, helping them thrive inside and out. I'm excited to have you with us, Stephanie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Raylan.
How did I do on that bio, by the way? Was that all right? That sound like you?
Where did you get that?
I made it up. So this is the fun part. Not that anybody cares, but basically all I do is before the shows, I always look at people's About Us pages. I just try to condense it into a way that makes sense. But the reason why I kept hinting towards the shamanic stuff, and I have tons of questions, but a little fun background. So a family member of mine was a lawyer. It's a weird thing with lawyers. She was a lawyer, and then one day she decided she didn't want to do that anymore, and she wouldn't travel the world, and she became a shaman. And a couple years later, her and her husband opened up a practice, like an energy healing practice. And interestingly enough, it was so, and this sounds, when I tell people, other business people about this, they're like, what? It was so successful that they shut it down. And it was because they were so inundated. It was just two of them. And they didn't know, like, this is in Michigan. They didn't know a lot of other people that did what they did. So, like, they couldn't handle the volume. And it became counterintuitive, right? Like, they wanted to help people, but because they were helping people, they were, like, drained, right? Because they were helping so many people. So they literally shut down their practice because it was so successful. So anyway.
Was this before you were in business and you can help them figure out
long
leverage
before.
Business model?
Yeah, I was in, I think I was in high school at the time. Again, because I was like, again, it was weird. I call her my auntie mom, and it was just weird because she was this lawyer before, like and then became the shaman and always talked about energy work. And of course, I'm like, that sounds like bullshit to me. So then she's like, let me do like energy healing. At the time, I was like struggling with like severe anger problems. Like I just was mad at everything. I was mad at the world. And I remember laying down on the table. And she was going through this energy healing practice with me. And she had a candle the other side of the room. And all of a sudden, like the middle of the thing, and she's like, I'm communicating with your guardian angels, whatever. I'm like, okay. I'm like rolling my eyes, you know, even though my eyes are closed, I'm rolling my eyes. And next thing you know, I feel like the flame is like right on my face. And I'm like, what the fuck is she doing? Like, why is this so close to me? And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I open my eyes, the candle's all the way across the room still. And just the stuff that she was telling me, I was like, okay, this is the first time I was like, all right, there's something else out there. And I think I was fortunate enough that I was exposed to that earlier on, and I didn't get set in my ways. Fast forward, now, like we created this marketing agency, and one of our clients is an energy healer, and her husband's a lawyer. So like it's this weird kind of thing of like I keep attracting these type of people to my business. And I think it's just my way of like, to your point, kind of helping these type of people. So anyway, all that being said, the first thing I want to ask you about is actually not that, but it's actually how the journey of how you got to here, right? Lawyer, you've hung out with the indigenous communities, you've done this, and now you're a coach. Walk me through the through line between all those things and how you've realized that coaching others to find that joy, the inner peace, if you will, is something that you want to do for your career, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, it's a long story, my friend.
That's why podcasts are great, because you
I
can tell a
know.
long story.
And I think it's also like what I like to say in advance of what my story is. It gives people permission to realize like everyone doesn't have a straight shot. You know, it's not like I went to law school and then I did this and then I became that and then I realized that I wanted to be that. My journey was way different. I started off, I graduated college and I moved out from the East Coast to the West Coast in the US to California. And I became an activist, an environmental activist, because fell in love with the redwoods. And that's when I remembered that I'm an earth person, that earth-based wisdom is my spiritual path and my purpose. And so I got really involved in environmental activism, and that took me to law. Actually, a friend of mine was killed by a logger. We were working around, protecting the ancient redwood forests and tree sitting, and that is a whole long story. But that's what got me into law. And also, I would say more than anything, and even as a coach, I'm an investigator. That's my asset as a coach, is that I have my skills as a lawyer and questioning, right? But I'm ultimately, when we're coaching, we're investigating, right? And so I am an eco investigator and a human investigator. And my mission is to understand the psyche and how we make decisions and how we transform so that we can live in harmony with ourselves, each other, and nature. And that is my purpose. Like, that unfolded through a windy journey. So after being in California for 7 years doing that, I moved back to New York to go to law school. And I was in New York City, and 9/11 happened, and I got involved in human rights. And at some point, and then I found myself, after doing like a year of work in Brazil, doing human rights work, I was burned out on activism, and I ended up in corporate litigation. So that's kind of where I got I kind of balanced myself out. Here I'm like on the completely other side of the whole spectrum. And and that's also kind of where I really picked up my business chops, It's like, that was cutthroat.
Well, I would imagine too, like I've realized how important it is to have that balance between the two, because I've also met with people that are very empathic, very much like, I just keep using the words energy healer types, but they suck with business. So no one knows who they are. Right. So it's like, cool. Like, you want to do this thing, but who are you really impacting? And so that's cool. You've had kind of the mixture of the both. So that way you can find that balance and improve people's lives, but also make a living doing it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I left the corporate situation, and while I was there, I started health coaching. Like, that was my first coaching journey in about almost 20 years ago. And I quickly built a really amazing business and was like just hustling on every front, and then I left the court. It's a long story, but when I did that, I left, I realized, like, how can I build in there's this, for me, it's a crossover between business and wellness and environment, like everything. And so my journey has been in this path towards integrating all those parts of myself.
Yeah, which is like, for a lot of people, and I think what's important to note here is it took you 20 years to integrate them all. Because
well, I'm not there yet either.
Exactly. I don't think we ever really are there, unless maybe you're like, Buddha, who like finds enlightenment, right? Like it's just it's not unrealistic. And then what's super fascinating today with coaching is that people are expecting, even, it doesn't matter, even if you got a business coach, whatever, there's still going to be some work. And I think we're just used to this quick win, like, no, I should have like a 6-7 figure company already. And it's like, why? Like, no, especially if you're building something that's meaningful. But so you had the health practice. I'm assuming it was around like more holistic ways of approaching health, or what was the health practice around?
Yeah. So I got certified. It was my first like coaching certification in holistic health coaching, I guess you'd call it. But I had my background was I was an herbalist, and I was like at that time an athlete and a raw foodist, and always just like on this longevity, like bio hack peak performance kick, because I was also a martial artist. And so like I was obsessed with peak wellness. Yeah. That's like one of the pillars in my work now, is about peak wellness. And, there's so many angles to that, but so that was my first journey. And then I kind of just was layering it on. Okay. Like, you want to be amazing in business. You want peak performance. Like, what are you eating?
Yeah.
What does eating have to do with business? Everything, and you want to save the climate and the this and the that. Well, what are you eating? What does the eating have to do with climate change? Everything. So everything is connected, And I think another piece of this is like, when I work with folks in like from wellness to mindset to soul work, energy work, all of it, it's always about like And it's the same thing for you, I'm sure, too. We all just have our own way to do it, but it's about excavating who the person really is. Because, I've been doing this business for a long time. I was doing business coaching for so long. I had an online business for years. And I found that after a while, like that was just not for me. Like the model I was doing before was not for me. And I kept pushing it and pushing it. And I was like, this isn't going to work. Like, this isn't what and what is, once we let go of sort of trying to fit into the mold, then we realize like, oh, there's something else, and like, what is my chart? What is my path to chart? And so I feel like that's where we're at right now. There's a lot of business models being pushed on people. Like, this is how you do it, and this is how you scale, and this is, right? And it's like drivel, drivel, drivel. Yet there's a million ways we haven't figured out yet. And I think that's where we're at a tipping point right now, where the old stuff it's not going to work for everybody.
Yeah, and also like what I love about what you're saying is like, for one, that's exactly why I changed around I moved my coaching program to be a mastermind. And the reason for that was I got really tired. Here's something that I noticed, and again, I think you'll appreciate, is that I was teaching people tactics on how they can grow their business, but it wasn't working. And I'm like, I don't understand why. Or it would work while they were with me because it was only like a 2 or 3 month program. But then when they would leave, they'd go back to the same old shit. And I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Oh, it's kind of never addressed the inner issues, right? Like I just was teaching tactics. So then when we moved to the mastermind, it felt more appropriate and I enjoyed it more because, for one, I don't have all the answers, right? Like, I might not be able to connect with you like someone else does in the mastermind. That's number one. But number two, it's a long-term play, right? Like you come out with a program, it may make money, but you don't like doing it. And I think that's why one of my favorite questions to ask, because we talked about like coaching and the style. I have the same style as you. My intro question is always, what do you want? Because what people do is they go, I want a 6-figure business. Okay, doing what? I want to do this. Okay, let's say I give you $100,000 though today, but you can't do that business, but you take it. And they go, yes. And I go, so you don't want that business. What you want is 6 figures.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
so let's figure out though, because like for me, I think what's really important and what I love about and want to get to with you next is around purpose. I'd rather someone have a purposeful business that they could do the rest of their life, not some hacky program that they in a year cancel because they're like, I don't want to do it anymore. So talk to me a little bit about how you are helping your clients and maybe even start with how you, because I would imagine how you help clients find their purpose is how you found yours. So walk me through, again, your journey maybe of finding your purpose and how you help people find theirs.
Well, my journey, my like my mission is to find my purpose, and every time I find my purpose, it changes. So I've become a master at excavating and finding purpose, and that's really why I feel really able to dial in really quickly with people. And it's not about finding purpose; it's about removing the blocks so you can see what's there. We are here. We are the essence of who we are. We came here for a reason. For me, the trees, I fell in love with the trees. Okay, I didn't even think, what's my purpose? I was working to protect ancient forest, 3,000-year-old trees. It was like, do what you got to do. And so like, I'm sure many people find themselves in that do what you got to do moment when it's passion. Passion. Purpose is aligned with passion. What are you passionate about? What do you do that you don't have to think about? You just do it. And then once you have to manufacture a business or a job around it, then it becomes a pressure. What's my purpose? And I always say to people who are like, well, I don't know my purpose. It's not that we don't know our purpose. It's that we're just feeling a little disconnected from ourselves. So you start by connecting to yourself. So I've been on this journey of connecting to myself for years. As an activist, I was lucky and blessed to be in places that were always like protecting places in nature where indigenous communities happened to live. And so I was placed in these situations to be in solidarity with Native people from different beautiful places that invited us into their ceremonies, invited us to pray with them and work with them. And so that's really how I started when I was in my early 20s, long time ago. And so how, for me, like that journey of purpose was weaving that in with this other kind of very linear way of really that understanding of multidimensionality of who I really am. And then wearing this other hat. And I think a lot of people get stuck here too. It's like, what your purpose is. You're just not allowing yourself to be all in on it because of your identity, who you're supposed to be, who you're meant to be. Right now I have this law degree. I had this whole other thing going on. Like, how do I do both of these. Who am I, right? One minute I'm wearing this hat, the next minute I'm wearing that hat. And it's a dance, and for me, and we all have our own path, but for me, like right now, the work that I'm doing, I work with a lot of investors, and I work in like really C-suite corporate environments, or people in the impact space really wanting to create systems change. Systems, I mean, like the financial system. So I have this privilege of working with people who are quite influential. And 10 years ago in my business, that wasn't what I thought I would be doing.
Yeah.
It was just allowing myself to integrate all parts of myself, to let go of the parts of my identity that didn't let the other parts shine. Mm-hmm. And that's that weaving that whole person experience together it's the journey.
Yeah, what's it's so funny because you're talking about, obviously, when you're finding your purpose, like who am I? It's a question that keeps coming up, and that's why I think like with our clients, when we go through the branding component of what we do, we call it brand therapy. Because it can feel like that.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Totally
like when you're trying to represent yourself online, you have to first know who the fuck you are. And if you have no idea who you are, then it's like, but so a question on the purpose thing, because you said like every time you find your purpose that you feel like it changes. Do you feel like purpose is stagnant, or do you feel like it's based on the season? Like,
yeah, I have kind of a methodology of many freaking methodologies. I'm like a napkin methodology creator. I'm sure you are too, right? So, so the way that I look at purpose is very different now than it was 10 years ago. Like it's become a chain, right? It's like, if you don't know your purpose and you can't articulate it in a marketing message, then shame on you, right? So it's now become a thing that you should feel shitty about yourself if you don't know. But that's not what purpose is. That's identity. So I look at people, we start with identity, and we start to like really unravel the parts of our identity that are not in alignment with who we feel like we are, who we want to become. And we start to understand all those traps that we fall into when we go back into the old environments, and those traps of pedigree or whatever it feels like. You need to think that you need a degree, or you think you need another certification or whatever. Like those are all identity things, right? And then the goal is to move from identity into purpose. And so when we reach that place of purpose, this is it. I feel like this is what I want to do. And we can create kind of a picture of it and how this might look in terms of a business or in the career, picture. And it feels aligned and feels good. What happens is then we start to make the business out of it. Then we start to make the marketing message out of it, the branding around it. And now we have a purpose identity. That's what I call the purpose identity. And so that's a beautiful place to be, because you could be like straight shot from here and it works. But if for some people, it just becomes another trap, right? And sometimes we get stuck in that, and it's like, I feel off. This isn't really it. And that's where we have to go deeper underneath the surface. And so for me, purpose isn't so much around like, what's my purpose? It's more like, how do I tap into higher purpose? So right now, that's my whole spiel. It's like, how do you tap into higher purpose? Because then we don't have to be identified with it. We get to just have that feeling every day, wake up and align to that. And then whatever the other thing we're doing is, it doesn't have to be like this trap that I think, our business. Like sometimes, the business makes the money. It might not be the thing that is 100% aligned all the time, because as we're evolving, and right now we're at this time on Earth where we're just evolving fast, right? Who you were 6 months ago, you're probably like, yeah, man, wow, I've evolved. And so what if your purpose has to match that all the time? It's stressful. So I just like to look at it like the compass is how do I align with higher purpose, and what does that feel like to me?
So then does the behavior, so like you mentioned like identity, so like is consistency of identity, therefore like I would imagine the behavior is what produces the purpose then? Is that fair to say?
Say that again?
So like, so instead of like, I feel like a lot of people design these purposes based off like abstract things, and they also design their purpose or think about their purpose and as their past self. This is who I've showed up as in the past, so here's my purpose. But it's like, but is that what you want? Because you can design something else. So is it fair to say that like if you want to find your purpose, maybe it's more so about like creating your purpose, and then you create the true self or future self, whatever you ever want to word it, And that it's like, what is the purpose of the future self? I know I'm going like really woo right now.
Yeah, but I guess that comes down to what's your definition of purpose, and we might all have a different definition, and that's okay, right? What if it like there's purpose, like a noun, and there's to be on purpose, which is more of a verb, like being on purpose,
Yeah.
right? And then there's that alignment to that feeling of purpose, and those are three different things. Like those are kind of it's confusing, but those actually have different meanings almost.
What does it feel like?
Like,
Because what's the third one, right? Feeling on purpose. Is that what you said?
yeah.
So what would that be like? Like, can you give me an
Let me
example?
ask you. So, yeah, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, give me a day where you wake up and you're like on fire and you're passionate and you're like, I'm fucking on purpose today.
Yeah. Well, this is actually how I found my purpose. Was I thought about these times and when they would happen, and then I said, let's just make more of this, and I create a business. So those times are usually when I'm helping people remove some type of victimhood from their life. I can't do this because, or helping them see a door, not even step through the door, but see a door of opportunity. And so everything that I designed, whether it was the academy or it was the agency, it's about removing excuses as to why you can't have what you want. So that's usually for me that the how it pops up for me,
So, what's your purpose?
to help others realize they deserve more through removing excuses and obstacles.
Okay. And is there something that like what's the outcome to that?
The outcome, generally speaking, is giving people an opportunity. And again, it won't be, and I thought it was getting people to step into being who they're meant to be, but I realized that I was attached to the outcome too much. I was
Yeah.
taking it personally. Versus now, the purpose is just to show them the door. It's almost like, as stupid as it sounds, it's kind of like I'm Morpheus. I'm not the main character in the Matrix. I'm Morpheus. I give people the option. Like it's like, for example, if you don't realize that you're holding yourself back from success because truly you're actually afraid of success, the moment that I show you or get you to see that for yourself, now you have choice.
Yeah.
But whatever you choose, I detach from that.
Right. So, these are a lot of words, right? And this is what makes up a great website. And this is what makes up a great talk, right? And a message. And so, purpose is you're like being purposeful for you is about empowering other people, right? It's about creating opportunity for other people, it's about helping people see, how amazing they are, all those things, right? And so ultimately, to me, purpose is just the more simple you can make it, like three words that, or you know what I mean? Like that takes away the ego part of it or the branding part of it, because that's the core essence of it. And then it could change, what you're doing could change with that. But then you can start to just knowing that part of your unique brilliance, right? What you're brilliant at, and how others see you as like the prophet, like that is the guiding star, right? It's less about all the words that we use. That I feel like we can start to say, okay, this is my brand, this is my message, this is how I do it. But my purpose is to empower people.
Yeah, true. And I think this part is so important, and that's why I love talking about it, is because anytime I've made the business about making money, we don't make money. But anytime I've made it about removing excuses for people, everything gets better. And it's even like the simple things of like this podcast, for example, right? Like there are people that I have interviewed that have never done a podcast, that are not online, that aren't. But when they come on the podcast, they go, "Hey, here's 2 to 3 clips. Go ahead and use them." And they go, "Oh, I started it because you removed the obstacle of I don't know how to create. I don't. It's already done. There you go." And so now it's like even as small as that. And then also, this also didn't bound me to one company. So I created 3 companies all aligned with that, because the how doesn't matter. The how can be applied to anything. And I think I think I've been screaming from the rooftops for the last like 6 months, maybe to a year, about this concept, because I see a lot of people that I want to say, I'll use the word lost, that are going to program after program, or they're doing, hack after hack, and they're like, I don't feel anything yet. And it's like, if you're making it about, and I'm sure maybe there's someone like this, but if it's only about making money, then you're going to get to a point where you make all the money and then you're like, still don't feel shit. Whereas we've had really high months, really low months, and I still feel that inner joy is still there always.
Yeah, I think that there is a point though where I see people, when you're like in a burning building,
Mm.
You got it. You're not like thinking about your the next quilt you're going to get on your new bed, right? You like get out of the building.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when when your financial is the most important thing, and you're starting from that place of what's my purpose. And you haven't really had that like deep inquiry yet. I think that's a tricky place. That's where we can fall into the trap of making our business like my purpose, right?
Yeah.
So there's two things. There's like the Tony Robbins who talks about when he didn't have a pot to piss in, for lack of a better, phrase, because that's what he says, that he was feeding hungry people. Like he had to do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? It wasn't like I'm going to do that so that I can have like, grace and create money.
Yeah.
He started that way, right? So my point is just like really getting honest with, if you're in that place of what's my purpose, but also wanting to do it for the business, for the money, it's like getting really honest with yourself. And because if that's the deal, then your purpose is money, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Your purpose today could be, I want to make $1 million. And then you're going to be successful because that's your purpose. So don't try and say, I want to make $1 million. And, I have this whole other purpose. You can say both. They're not mutually exclusive,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying? In the beginning, sometimes your purpose is, I got to make money.
And exactly. You got to start with something. And also and just like kind of like, as you talk about your journey, whatever your offer or your business, sometimes the first 2 to 3 to 5 won't hit. But you kind of have to do that. Like I haven't really seen too many people that can avoid that first program or that first thing they put out that doesn't hit. And you kind of need that to go, well, why didn't it work? Well, maybe because your just heart wasn't into it, right? Like, and if it's not into it, then no wonder it didn't grow. And then there's also sometimes where you come up with a program and it hits. Like my first program was about sales, and it was successful, considering it was my first one ever, and it did pretty well. But I hated doing it. If I had to do one more damn call about, hey, this is how you do a sales call, I was gonna die. Like it was terrible.
Yeah.
So it's like I think you kind of have to go through that somewhat to figure that out. So I guess was there any aha moments for you that, because I would imagine that you didn't come out the gates and started your first program and you're like, oh, I'm crushing it in business. So like, was there a moment where for you there was kind of an aha moment where you're like, oh, I found it. Not only am I making money, but I'm happy doing it. What was that program for you, or what was that time in your life like when you found that I'm on the right path kind of moment?
I actually did like my first coaching programs that I was selling. I did really well, but I also was working still in corporate law in a law firm.
Uh-huh.
And I was like just doing like it was the side hustle, and I was like, I should leave now and do this, but then the market tanked. This was in 08, that was 2008, and I was like, I should leave now. But for me, it was really easy in the beginning because I'm really good at just following the instructions, and it works if it works. If it's aligned, it has to be aligned for me, right? But then when I did leave and moved out, I moved actually from New York City to Oregon. And I was like, I had a head injury. I had a whole thing. So I had to kind of pause for a while. But then I was rediscovering what my thing was. So that was my moment where this isn't working. And that's so I did another coaching program and got some more certifications, and then I followed the program again and it worked. And then it got to a point where it didn't work. The aha moment is it's an inside game, 1,000%, And so I think that, now I've been gone through so many phases where it's like, you said it before too. It's like, by this point I should be successful. What's going on, But I had a lot of stops and starts. I think the big takeaway is that consistency, even if you're not sure if this is the right thing, is like just being consistent and, obviously course correcting, but it's, the more you stop and start over, I think sometimes that's where we lose momentum. It's really about momentum. I mean, I just said a whole lot of different things. Does that make sense?
No, trust me, it makes perfect sense. Like we've had clients that like, I can't get them to stop coming up with a new offer after like a month. And you're like, do you see how you're confusing your audience when every month you want to change the brand strategy or you want to change how you represent yourself? Like, you're confusing everyone and you're confused and we could tell, which is why maybe it's not working. Like sometimes you have to, I think you have to do it long enough and it not work, make the tweaks, get, feedback from people. Actually, this brings me to this. Like, did you get help as you were coming up? Like, did you have coaches along the way? Were they business oriented or were they spiritual? Were they both? Like, walk me through maybe your journey of hiring a mentor or a coach when you first started out.
Oh my gosh, I'm like I have a support team, from the beginning. Like I always had coaches. I believe in like there have been periods where I've said, okay, I'm not going to invest a lot of money in a coach right now. I'm going to invest in like four different people for the different things that I need. Whether it's marketing in the business or whether it's my own spiritual support team.
Yeah.
And so I'm always working with people because it's just this inner growth. For me, that's my business growth is my inner growth. And so, but I've been in group programs, I've been in masterminds, I've had the, single private coaches. So
Why do you think people struggle with like then investing in themselves? From your perspective, right? Like, because I'm sure along your journey, you've met people that are like, I don't know. Like for me, maybe it's just maybe some of the type of people I've been talking to recently, but like there's been people that you could tell that they need it and they want it and they know it. But I think in their head, and I've called people out on this, where it's like, you actually are afraid of what if this works? Like, I think it's like, because they have to evolve and leave behind their past self a bit. And that's scary as shit. Like, it's kind of like,
yeah, but I also think it's a stretch. Like if you're in the industry, per se, if you're used to investing in yourself, you get it. But if you aren't like, I'm going to be a coach, and you get that mentality of, well, coaches have coaches. It makes sense, right?
yeah,
It's different. Like for me, I went through a stretch where I was helping, people leave corporate, create consulting companies and coaching businesses. And so that was really easy because they get it.
yeah,
Other times where I'm talking to people who have more than enough resources to invest in themselves. In fact, they're investors and they invest in other people and startups and things that they don't know are going to work, but are hesitant to invest a larger sum in their own, I'm not saying they're not doing their personal work, but in something like, like coaching. But I think it's just foreign. It's like, sticker shock sometimes because they're just new. And so I think it's, when I first started, there weren't even coaches. Like it was the beginning of coaching. I mean, pretty much the beginning of it. And you had to educate people on what a coach is, It's like, sports,
Well, I think that's why you kind of get it too, because you mentioned you did martial arts. What martial arts did you do?
I did capoeira.
Okay.
Like a long time.
Yeah, nice. I do jiu-jitsu, and I used to be a professional MMA fighter. So like for me, my entire life in athletics, you had a coach. So when I started being an entrepreneur, I was like, this is what you do. Like, what do you mean? You supposed to just figure this shit out on your own? Like, what is? Yeah. But speaking of coaching, you mentioned on your website, transformation coach. What does a transformation coach mean to you? Like, what is a transformation coach?
It's like, so one of the things too is like finding the word.
Right.
What do I call myself? I'm an earth person. And I'm also not an earth person. Like, anyway, the name of who you call yourself that's changed so many times for me. I'd say more like I'm an evolutionary coach. Like that's where it's at right now. Cause I'm concerned. My big focus and my next evolution is like, and I'm continuing my journey too. It's like, I'm curious. I want to be intellectually challenged. And, my mission is really understanding not just the psyche and mindset shifts, but like a collective shift in the psyche of humanity, so that we can create systems change on this planet. And when I say that, I mean like everything from food systems to education to health to financials. Like all systems on this planet are not sustainable, right? So that's my focus right now. And so I'm really curious about what does it take to really change this collective psyche? Where it used to be really fascinated with how do you like get the mindset shift to grow your business, or how do you get the mindset shift to change your life, to change your habits, to change your behaviors, like all that stuff. But I'm looking at it more from a perspective of when I say transformation or evolutionary coach, it's like we're evolving as a species on this planet. Even in my lifetime, in things are speeding up. Obviously, there's like bigger issues now that are finally coming to the front. And so I'm a futurist also. I mean, the things that I was talking about 20 years ago that the trees were telling me, I hope I didn't lose credibility there, but
Listen, you got to listen
like,
to my episode with my client Alea. She was talking about divine line. Trust me, you didn't lose any credibility.
okay. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I mean, people are finally getting what I was saying 20, 30 years ago, and many people were saying, but even now, the things that I'm seeing for the future, everyone doesn't get it. And so for me, I'm looking at how do we shift us on a collective evolutionary scale? And so the people I'm working with who have a lot of influence and a lot of resources, capital to deploy towards changing systems. My goal is like, you know what, that work is underway anyway, like systems change. And if you do it with the same mindset and worldview that we have now, we're going to get the same result as we have.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm looking at how do we shift the collective psyche so that we can have real change.
So are you looking at it from perspective of like a bottom up or top down approach? Because you mentioned obviously some of the people you work with are like investors. So that's kind of like a top down approach. Is that kind of your plan and helping the collective evolve?
Well, it's a ripple impact, right? If I get to work with folks who are, first of all, here's another bit, right? For any of your listeners and for like, I'm sure the work that you do, you get to pick who you work with, And so that is another game changer. Cause like in the very beginning of your business, you might just say, everyone.
I need money. Let's go. Yeah.
Right. And so then you get to a point where it's like, that's a mindset shift too. That's coming into an empowerment thing to choose who you want to work with and what you charge and how it goes. And the impact you want to have. So for me, it's if I'm saying what is my purpose and what is my impact, it's to say that, I don't have thousands of followers. I have a podcast. It hasn't grown very much in a few years. And I'm like, but it serves a purpose. And it comes to a point where, you decide, I want to be an influencer. I want 3 million followers, 10 million followers. And I say, I don't, I'm behind those people.
Yeah.
I want to influence those people who have influence. That's the ripple effect. Does that make sense?
No. Yeah. And that's kind of my position too, is that like, I jokingly said that I don't want to be Neo in the Matrix. I want to be Morpheus. Like I want to be behind the people that, like our agency, for example, that was where it spawned from, was that I saw so many people that were high level in business, but also they had a successful business, but they had a wonderful life too. They were great husbands and wives. They were great fathers and mothers, and they also happened to have a 7-8 figure business, but nobody knew them. And that shit used to, I don't know why, it made me so mad. Like the stuff that you're saying could change people's lives, but yet nobody knows who you are. So it started being around the idea of finding the undiscovered thought leader, or probably more importantly, the result leader. But anyway, that's kind of my thing too, which is like, I want to be behind the scenes of some of the bigger, more impactful, YouTube channels and so on and so forth. But when we talk about the next evolution, I guess you mentioned obviously your evolution of, some of what you want for the collective, but like, what's your next evolution? Like, what have you been really excited about and pondering about? Because you seem like the type that's similar to me, because I haven't really found people like this that are constantly asking questions. Like for me, like anytime I do anything, I'm like, do I actually want to do this? Or am I just doing it for this? Or like, okay, what about this? What the hell does consciousness mean? Like that's the shit that I'm interested in. And again, I'm excited to ask you this question because again, I don't have too many guests that are that ponder this random shit like me. So what have you been thinking about lately? And what do you think your next evolution is?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. I've been thinking about the last few guests I had on my podcast were like PhD system scientists and are cosmologists. And so the humbling nature of where I sit right now of, oh my gosh, I want to speak like you, like really understanding why we're here as humans and what we're doing from an evolutionary standpoint in a scientific way where irrefutable.
Yeah.
Try and rebut that somebody. So I just had this woman on my podcast who I was like, oh my God, that's gorgeous. So for me personally, my next evolution is really taking some time this next year. I'm doing my end of year next year, forecasting, and really taking time to Write. I've written 3 books and haven't published any of them. And so it's about like just bringing those back to the fore. And there's another thing is that if you don't put your stuff out there and it's a special idea that's supposed to be out there, someone else is going to do it. And I've seen that so many, how many times have you seen that? Right. But it's also that kick in the ass. It's all, take responsibility, then get your shit out there. Yeah. So this is the year for me to just articulate my thoughts right now and dive deep into research and formulate my thoughts around this collective psyche shift that's my role in the next evolution of humanity.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, and you're so right, because I probably said this to an annoying degree for the listeners, but in jiu-jitsu, we always say, like, you don't invent a move, you discover it. Like, so it's one of those things where, like, it's out there for anybody to capture. And if you read, like, War of Art, he talks about this where, like, look, like, the muses, as he calls them, when you sit down to write, like, you're connecting to a muse that's going to give you that information. Like, you're just reaching up and grabbing it. But if you don't grab it, someone else is going to take that idea because it has to be out there, right? It's kind of one of those things. It's kind of fascinating to think about. So I wanted to mention this too. So on the transformation side, I'm going backwards a little bit. It was the first time I heard about this where somebody, a mentor of mine, he was like, I'm a transformation coach. And I didn't understand that concept. And he basically was like, I don't believe in self-help. And he was like, the difference between self-help and transformation is this. So self-help starts with the premise that you're broken and you need help. Whereas transformation starts with the premise that you're the source, you are a whole. And you're not really transforming. It's a weird kind of word, right? Because transform, but he's like, no, all you're doing is just going back to what you know. So I'm just kind of curious for you, like, one, how does that sit with you and what that means to you? Or how's that, what does that feel like to you?
Yeah, like I started off as a wellness coach. And then I was a shamanic energy medicine practitioner. And I mean, all of these things still are, right? But these are the things I called myself. And then I did executive coaching for years. I did leadership coaching. I did business coaching. I did legal coaching. I started a law firm and was like doing contracts for businesses, for coaching businesses and licensing and all those kinds of strategies. I was then like all the names you can think of the coach, the business legal coach, the whatever, the success coach. I had all those names. I have a business card for every one of them. Mm-hmm. And like none of them ever, it's so I really look at myself now. I'm a guide. Yeah. I'm a guide at the end of the day. And so for a transformation coach, whatever you call yourself as a coach, you're guiding people. So you're guiding people through transformation. It's a life coach. You're guiding people through transformations in life. I work with people. I love to say this. You ask your clients what they call you. When you tell your friends you're working with someone, what do you say? That's how you know. That's how you know. Yeah. Well, that's how you kind of know what you are, right? Because that's what you're doing, and that's how they perceive you. So, what we call ourselves is
probably irrelevant, right?
It's
like what do you give to people, right? It's like what's in it. Like it comes out to what's the result you give to people, and that's whatever. I think you're right though. People get caught up in too much of what it is. Is there anybody that you look up to that kind of inspires you for what you kind of create? Like some of my favorite people in this kind of space, and not just the business side, but like the business side for me, it's like, the ones that I've mentioned probably, again, a bunch on this podcast, but like Joe Polish, because he's one of the OGs of marketing. He's a direct mailer guy, but also he's just really smart in that way. And on the woo side, I'll call it, it's like people like Michael Singer, who wrote the book Untethered Soul. It's like, David Hawkins, who wrote the book Power versus Force, and Dr. Joe Dispenza, like that kind of work. But is there anyone out like for you that you kind of really like the way that they look at the world and you kind of take from them a little bit?
All those books are on my shelf right now. I love it. That's great. I'm studying right now. I'm studying like this. I'm studying Paul Brunton is one. Like I'm studying deeper spiritual teachers, and this woman who was just on my podcast, Jude Caravan, she's a PhD and cosmologist. And so it's pretty science, but I'm like wanting to understand more the science of this evolutionary transformational process. For business, Stephen Kotler, I'm reading his book right now. The Art of Impossible. Good book. So I love Stephen. Are you familiar with Stephen Kotler?
No, I'm writing it down right now.
He's all about flow and peak performance.
Yeah.
And an amazing writer. So Yeah, I like a lot.
Yeah, I feel like just the best. I'm always surprised actually. There's been a few, not many, but there's a few people that I've talked to. They're like, yeah, I don't read, or like, no, I don't really take from anybody else. I just kind of, and it's like, maybe it's just the way that I look at the world. But like for me, I think a good coach. Well, I shouldn't say that. How I operate is my job is to find the through line between these connections, right? There's very few people that read maybe a Michael Singer book and then go and read a Russell Brunson book about marketing, like, and then finding the through line between the two of them. Or
Yeah.
like you're learning from a cosmologist and then you're taking that and then applying it to business. Like we kind of
Yeah.
become the through line of all these kind of concepts. And I think what people get caught up in, which is interesting, is that like I talked to somebody recently and they said, well, I don't have anything new to say. Like I don't have anything that's mine. It's not like an IP. And I'm like, that's not a good reason to not be a coach. Like you can still see something. Like I see myself as a curator of information, right? Like I've done a lot of research on a lot of different businesses, a lot of different people, a lot of ways to live their life. And then depending on who comes to me, I usually can pull something out of my toolbox and go, hey, like this strategy worked for this person. You remind me of this person. Let's try this. Right. And again, I think people get caught up in, what does it mean? And this goes back to, again, we don't invent anything. We just discover it. And I think people get caught up in, well, I can't create a business because I don't have anything that's unique.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it interesting how we think that we can't create something because it's already being done? But then there's look at the big brands. There's always more than one, and there's always another one popping up, and it's right. That's I don't know. I think we we can always find a way to talk ourselves out of anything. I love that your work is around no excuses because that's clearly an excuse if
Mm-hmm.
you think that you have nothing
Yeah.
special to say.
That's,
Everyone does, and that's about falling in love with yourself.
we're so good at that. Like, we're good at, I think as humans, is like two things. It's like creating meaning, obviously, and then telling stories as to why we can't do something. And one of my favorite things to talk a lot about has been about the idea of like, let's evaluate the stories you're telling yourself and then choose whether or not you want to keep them. Because the thing is,
Yeah.
like, the stories we tell ourselves, they do serve us. They serve a purpose. It's usually to protect us, right, and kind of keep us into our quote unquote past self, because that's comfortable. Even if you're going through hell, though, at least you know that hell. You don't know the other one you may
Yeah.
go be stepping into. But it's just fascinating to me. I think like how, I don't know. It's I'm curious to know in your line of work, but also like, have you noticed? I just don't know if people are interested enough to become more self aware. It seems like I have no data to support this. Okay, Stephanie, so don't hold me to this. But it just feels like to me that as time goes on, we are less curious about what's going in our heads, what's going on in our body, than ever before. Like I've always felt weird around my friends and stuff, and even business people I meet today. Like, hey, do you ever consider like how full of shit you are? Like, do you ever like do you ever like sit back some days and go like, man, like I was wrong here. Like, do you ever do that kind of work?
Yeah.
And they're like, no. And I'm like, something wrong with me,
Yeah.
or is no one interested anymore in like becoming more self aware? And also too, like, who the fuck would ever say they're not self aware? You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's when you walk into a space and you can read a room and you can talk to people and you can hear, it's just it's assessing on a level of consciousness. And that consciousness is measured by how self aware you are, how self responsible you are, how impeccable you are with your word, right? Like telling those stories,
Mm-hmm.
perpetuating the stories. How are you using your words? I have a whole program around that, like vocabulary of increase. It's called. It's a really everything is down to extracting the medicine, the gift, the lesson from your experience. And so, if you think that, say, you don't, just back to this person, like I don't have anything unique to offer, then you're not looking at yourself, right? Like look at yourself and what are you learning right now about yourself?
Mm-hmm.
That you have to offer somebody who hasn't learned that about themselves yet.
Yeah. I'm laughing because you're way nicer than me. What I told this person was, you're right. You don't have anything unique to offer. And then what the reason I do that is because usually now you have evidence. What usually happens is they go, no, I do, and here it is, and you go, okay, cool, you do that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that too I wanted to talk to you about was the idea of self image. Talk to me a little bit about like again, what you help your current clients with when it comes to their self-image. We all know the importance of self-image, but I get kind of, anyway, I just wanted to talk to you about it because for me, self-image is incredibly important. And I don't think people are looking at how they actually see themselves often enough, I should say.
Yeah. So this goes back to the identity piece. If you're not like seeing yourself for the truth of who you are, then where are you wrapped up in some identity that is either no longer serving you, or how is it serving you to be protecting yourself in that, right? And so for me, for an example, is self-image. When I went down followed my path as an environmental activist, I had no questions about who I was. But when I came back to New York City, I was like, whoa, I'm in law school in New York City. And it was an identity shift. Self-image always comes down to that identity shift, right? If we want to shift to make six figures, if you want to shift from six figures to $1 million, you need a big identity shift.
Yeah.
And that begins with how you see yourself and how you want to see yourself. You start to project yourself as who you want to be, and that becomes your new self-image. And anything that doesn't align to that, that's the work we got to do, right? Because that's the opportunity. It's like, it doesn't happen overnight necessarily that you have this self-image shift or this identity shift. It's really seeing that and knowing with certainty, like that's me, I'm going there. And then those parts that come in to sabotage it, okay, that's a self-image thing. It's like, well, let's look at it. It's hard to talk about it without context, right? But
no, it makes
for example,
when I
was, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that makes perfect sense to me. Because I also too, like, what you just alluded to earlier was that like you had almost, I don't want to say identity crisis, but when you came back and you were like in law school, it was because your identity was wrapped in what you were doing versus like who you really are, I guess you'd say. Like without, because it's like there's like a thing exercise like my mentor would do, and he would ask people, and he's so patient, and I think that's why he's such a good coach, is that he'll sit in silence for as long as it takes, but he'll ask you like, okay, like, who is Stephanie? And then usually they go through, this is what I like, all the things that they do, and he goes, well, before you were doing those things, were you still you? And they're like, well, yeah. All right, so who are you then? Well, I'm a mother. Okay, before you were a mother, were you still you? Like, and so then you realize like, oh, well, what the fuck does it mean to be me?
Nice, that's great. Yeah. I mean, it's also place, right? It's even if you like, who am I? And you know who you are. This is kind of like you said before, what's consciousness? Consciousness is experiencing itself through us. I'm just taking a step further. Yeah. Consciousness is experiencing itself through us, right? So do we have consciousness? We are consciousness. Consciousness is a separate thing that is experiencing itself through us. What is consciousness, right? And so who are you? That's another question of consciousness experiencing itself through me, Stephanie, or through you, Raylan, is a different thing. And so, you as a mother, someone as a mother is still an identity. It's still self-image, right? And it's still you. It's you experiencing yourself as that. Yeah. And so, right. So it's still, I don't know that we're one thing. We're souls, we're energy, we're consciousness, we're nature, we're all these things. If you really want to get to the core of it, we're nature.
You said something there, like we are consciousness going through us. So then there's two parts, right? It's almost like Descartes, like I think, therefore I am. There's two people in that statement, right? So like, then are you the vessel or are you the consciousness? Which one are you?
That's the ponder. That's to ponder, right? Which one are you? I mean, it's are you a soul? Is your soul live in you? Is your soul out there? Like, what is your body? This is the journey. Like, I can tell you what I think to be the answer, but this is the journey we go on.
Well, I want to know. What do you think? I actually have no idea. I was just curious.
What do I think about what?
Like, are you consciousness or are you the vessel?
I am everything. I am. I just am. I don't have to. Once I begin to identify it, then I'm an ego trying to figure it out. I just am.
Yeah.
So that's why we get to, when we're here, like in this journey in the game of life, we can be whatever and whoever we want. And that's why our self-image gets to get fun. It's like anything else, any reason why you can't be like, I am a celebrity today,
Yeah.
you know, like any reason why you're not that is your own decision. It's your own making. It's your own meaning making of your reality. You know what I mean? I think we're getting a little bit like esoteric here,
No,
but
this is, by the way, this is the shit that I always want to talk about, but none of my guests like know what the hell I'm talking about, so I can never talk about it. But I think no, it's just, I think it is interesting
but
though. Yeah, go ahead.
let me bring it down to really, because it's like all this stuff out there, it comes down to meaning making. So wherever anyone is on the journey, like that might have not made any sense, and that might have been like, oh yeah, I want to explore that. But really what it comes down to is our own meaning making about who we are, our own meaning making about our how we express that or actualize it through a business or through our purpose work. Or, you know what I mean? Purpose, even. It's a meaning making journey.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I even brought it up and wanted to, I want to talk about it more is because I think when people start to realize that they're not their thoughts, a lot more can happen. Like what you just said there, like that road to nobody. Like, you know, again, the books that I mentioned before, you know, that is, again, I'm not saying that people are going to get there tomorrow, but like that is true enlightenment, is that road to nobody. Like to be no one, but also be everything. Like that is, I just am. But it's like, it's interesting because in order to come to that realization, you have to go through that exercise of like, am I the talking in my head or am I the one observing it? Like what does that look like? And then when you figure all that shit out, or at least you are aware of it, then dealing with things like anxiety or dealing with things like fear of opening your business, then they become way easier, because when you're having that anxiety about like, man, no one's going to buy from me, it's like, oh, that thought pattern is my past self, or that's just a thought, that's not me. And then it allows you to
Yeah.
just observe and it goes away and you just do the fucking work. Because I've said this like 1,000 times at this point, but like the only reason why I've had any success in my business or in my life has been because I spend less time worrying about why it won't work and I just do the thing. And
Yeah.
then once I do the
Yeah.
thing, then I get the results back and I go, okay, I'll do this thing. Like I just don't put a lot of effort in thinking about creating the meaning around why it didn't work or did work. I just do the thing. And if it doesn't work, I go, okay, I'll do something else. Does that make sense?
That's a superpower.
Now, again, like it wasn't, what's interesting about that is that it came from, parts of it anyway, that came from not having much growing up. So I didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
luxury of going, I have a bunch of things at my disposal. I'm super, super smart. I just played I guess you could say an experiment of not being a victim in my life and going, if I choose to do something, I choose to do it. And I just do it. I'm not going to create anything
Yeah.
around it. And I stumbled upon it. And I didn't realize until later on, I had a mentor who talked to me about it. I was like, did you realize that this is what you're doing? And if people want to get really woo, like you're creating in the quantum field without knowing, right? And I was like, what the fuck? Okay. And it just became this
Yeah.
weird, interesting thing. Anyway, I appreciate letting me go down a
Yes.
rabbit hole. Really quick.
No, that's a beautiful rabbit
Yeah.
hole, because that quantum piece was all of it. It was like you decided, and you chose the timeline of where it was already done.
Mm-hmm.
And all you did was take the steps to get there. Like, oh, that worked, that didn't work. Okay, and you chose the timeline. It was already done for all of us,
Yeah.
right? That's another self-image piece, but we get to choose the timeline where it's already done.
Well, listen, Stephanie, this has been fun. Listen, for anyone who's listening to this, I would highly recommend. I think people like you are incredibly important, because I think before they're prerequisite, and obviously people can come to you after they've created a business and after doing big things, of course. But I think this work that you're doing, whether it's defining the purpose or helping people with their self-image or helping people with their mindset, whatever it is, that evolution between who they are to their future self, you're the prerequisite to everything. Like, I'm oftentimes heard saying this, that like before you hire a tactical coach, I'll say, you need to work with someone like you to figure your shit out, to figure out what you actually want to do. And then I think that the beautiful thing about what you did, Stephanie, is that you have both. You can help someone with the tactical and help someone with the intangible. So anyway, I just want to say that I appreciate what you do, and it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Thank you, really. And this has been so fun to connect with you and hear what you're doing. And it's nice to connect with the one who gets it too. So it's been fun.
I try. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And that was it.